So welcome to part 3, the final part. And we're going to talk about aligning the bottom-up plans with the top-down objectives and building consensus. We have so far covered the collaborative evaluation of bottom-up plans and the rigorous assessment of investment requests. So now let's talk about the critical final step, aligning the bottom-up plans with the top-down objectives and building the consensus that drives execution. So here's what I've observed. This alignment process is where planning either succeeds spectacularly or it fails miserably. And if you force alignment by just imposing top-down targets on unwilling functional leaders and participants, you get compliance but not commitment. On the other hand, if you capitulate to the bottom-up requests and you abandon your strategic ambition, you will get buy-in on a mediocre plan that does not move the needle that the business needs to move forward. So yes, you need to find the synthesis. A plan that is strategically ambitious, operationally realistic, and genuinely supported by the leadership team. So let me show you how. First, you quantify the gap and be explicit about it. After you have collected the bottom-up plans and you've evaluated them rigorously, map them against your top-down targets. Where are the gaps? How big are they? Be specific. Here is what this looks like. Our top-down target is $75 million ARR, which requires 80% growth. Our bottom-up plans from sales, marketing, and customer service, if you aggregate them collectively, they will deliver $62 million ARR or 48% growth. We have a $13 million gap, which is 17% of the target. This gap exists primarily in Q3 and Q4. Q1 and Q2 plans are reasonably aligned. So you quantify the gap by revenue, by quarter, by function, make it all visible. You cannot close a gap you haven't clearly defined. Second, categorize why the gap exists. Gaps, they usually fall into specific categories. Understanding the category helps you figure out how to close the gap. And what are the capacity gaps? Bottom-up plans, they assume less capacity than top-down targets require. Sales planned for 25 new reps, but to hit the target, we need 35. Productivity gaps need to be brought into the picture as well. The bottom-up plan, they assume current productivity levels will continue. The top-down targets, they implicitly require very high level of productivity. There are investment gaps. Functional leaders are saying, we could do more if you had more resources, but those resources are not in the bottom-up budget requests. So there's a final component, which is the risk tolerance gaps, and that's more like the bottom-up plans are conservative, they're built with buffer and downside protection. Top-down targets, they assume things will go reasonably well. So observe that when you explicitly categorize these gaps, it changes the conversation. Instead of arguing about whether the gap should exist, you are discussing how to close it given the category it falls into. Collaboratively explore these gap closing scenarios. That's very important. This is where all the synthesis happens. All the goodwill is developing at this point. You are not imposing the top-down target and you're not accepting the bottom-up plan as is. You're working together as a group, as a constructive group, through constructive discussions to find the path that bridges the gap. So I generally have facilitated by modeling multiple scenarios, really, with all the functional leaders. Scenario A, you close a gap through maybe capacity additions. If you hire 10 more reps, then your bottom-up plan, then that 2 million additional investment, how much bookings am I going to get out of it? And how much of these bookings will convert to revenue? You look at scenario B, you close the gap through productivity improvements. If we improve the rep productivity by 12% through enablement, territory optimization, maybe better lead quality, we can close a substantial amount of the gap maybe. You can pursue both. But whatever you do in the second case, you require that operational improvement component. Think about a scenario C. You close a gap through maybe pricing and packaging changes. If we increase the average deal size by 15% through maybe better packaging and reduced discounting, we will close the $6 million of gap. But it requires product and sales alignment on value-based selling. But again, keep in mind, these are all you can have a combination approach. We hire 5 reps to improve productivity by 8% and we increase deal size by 10%. That combination closes the full $1.3 million gap with reasonable stretch in each area. So model these scenarios together, evaluate the feasibility, evaluate the risk, evaluate the investment requirements, and evaluate the timing of each, and find the combination that feels ambitious, but achievable. And this is exactly the approach I described in the top-down planning series. You're not arguing about whether the gap should exist. You're problem solving together about how close it is, or rather how to close it, not how close it is, how to close it. The other element is to negotiate with empathy and curiosity. I talked about that in part one, in the other series on top down. Negotiating with curiosity will provide that intellectual rigor around the frameworks that you build. Your functional leaders are not being difficult. They are trying to help you build realistic plans which they see on the ground. Your job is to help them see the possibilities that they might not have considered, while respecting the constraints that are real. So how do you navigate that? Sales, I hear you're concerned that hiring 35 reps is aggressive given the recruiting capacity constraints. I hear you. What if you faced it differently? 8 in Q1, 10 in Q2, 10 in Q3, 7 in Q4. How would that help? Would that smooth the recruiting load? And what if we brought in a recruiting firm for the first 15 hires to accelerate the process? Or marketing, I understand you're worried about maintaining lead quality if we increase volume by 40%. But what if we pilot into new channels with 20% of budget, prove that they can deliver quality leads and then scale? Now, does that not mitigate the risk while still building toward the target, the strategic target? All you're doing right now is you're simply acknowledging their concerns and problem solving together. You're not dismissing their constraints and issues that they're raising. Make all these trade-offs permanent and involve the CEO. Sometimes after all the negotiation, you still have gaps or you might have disagreements. That's when you need to escalate to the CEO for final decisions. But do it in a way that is transparent and constructive. I present the CFO with the choices clearly. We have negotiated extensively with sales. They are comfortable with the $65 million revenue plan, which requires an incremental $5 million investment. And to hit the $75 million top-down target, we would need $8 million investment and very aggressive stretch assumptions. So a stretch plan is possible, but the high risk if we miss some productivity assumptions, we'll have over-invested and still miss the revenue. CEO, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to commit to the $75 million plan with a higher risk profile? Or do you want to adjust our top-down target to $68 million with a higher confidence of achievement? Frame it again, like I said, as strategic choice, a trade-off, not as CFO versus functional leader. The CEO needs to make the call, and everyone needs to commit to that decision. You need to build a consensus to shared ownership. Once you have aligned on the plan, whether it's a full top-down target, a negotiated middle ground, or maybe a thoughtfully revised target, you need the entire leadership team to commit to it. The CFO, they often facilitate this conversation. They're explicitly involved in shaking hands and clapping backs, if you will. We have worked through bottom-up plans, we've negotiated gaps, we have modeled scenarios, and here's a final plan. This plan requires each of you to deliver on what we have discussed. It also requires finance to deliver on the investments that we have committed to. And it requires all of us to work together collaboratively. And if we do that, then we can execute. Then I go around the table. Sales, can you commit to the plan? Get an explicit yes. Remember, get an explicit yes from each leader, not by email, not by phone, eye to eye. That way you create shared ownership and mutual accountability. And the most important thing after you do that is to connect the plan to execution. As I discussed in the top-down planning series, a plan only matters if it drives execution. Translate the annual plan into quarterly operating plans for each function. And at the start of each quarter, sit with each functional leader. Here's what you committed to. And here's what you committed to for Q2 and this for the year. Here are the specific hiring, specific programs, specific milestones. Do you feel that you're on track? Are you getting the right level of support? What additional support can I provide? What obstacles should we clear? And when you start engaging, the plan becomes a framework for running the business, not a document that gets filed away. So let me give you a personal example of how all this come together. We started with a $75 million top-down target and $62 million bottom-up plan, a $13 million gap. Through the process, I've described how the sales have agreed to stretch from $45 million to $52 million by hiring 5 additional reps and implementing productivity improvements they believed in. On the other hand, customer success agreed to drive expansion from $12 million to $15 million by focusing on underserved segments and improving pricing on renewals. We found $3 million in pipeline acceleration through better marketing, sales alignment, and improved conversion rates. We agreed to revisit the plan at mid-year with option to invest further if Q1 and Q2 are tracking to the plan, or better still, exceeded the plan. All good. The final plan ended up being, what, $70 million, not the full 75, but much better than the $62 million initial bottom line, right? And more importantly, every functional leader, they genuinely believed they could hit their number. And they did. We finished the year with close to what, 69 to 70 million, pretty much on target. And that is what a successful bottom-up planning looks like. You honor the ground truth that the functional leaders, they see activities every day. You challenge them to think bigger. You push them to find the opportunities. You negotiate with empathy and respect. You build the plans collaboratively. You create a genuine commitment to execution. Remember, the top-down planning series, I emphasize setting strategic ambition and pushing for strategic targets. You remember that? In this bottom-up plan, I've emphasized understanding the operational reality from the lens of the people who are working in the field and building those realistic plans. And that is where the magic happens. The magic happens when you start integrating both approaches. You start synthesizing the findings, the strategic goals, while building plans that are grounded in operational capacity and genuine commitment. So let me close finally with the characteristics of what a successful bottom-up planning is and I've observed. It has to have genuine empathy. The CFO, they approach the functional leaders' plans with curiosity, with respect, with empathy, not skepticism and judgment. 2, you have to provide rigorous justification. Research requests are backed by clear business cases, quantified impacts, and thoughtful ROI analysis. 3, you establish a collaborative problem-solving framework. Gap between bottom-up and top-down are addressed through joint exploration of scenarios and trade-offs, not through imposing or capitulating. 4, you look for transparent trade-offs. You create the transparency. Constraints are made visible, priorities are clear, and decisions are explained with rationale. 5, you create this shared ownership now. The final plan is owned by the entire leadership team, not by the executive team like the CEOs, the CFOs, not just by finance or individual functions. And 6, most importantly, you connect it to the execution. The plan drives quarterly and monthly decision making. It creates accountability for delivery. When you start integrating the top-down strategic plan with that rigorous bottom-up operational planning, you get the best of both worlds. Plans that are ambitious enough to drive real growth and impact, realistic enough that people commit to executing them, and specific enough that you can track performance and make adjustments on the fly as needed. That is the key to creating a fantastic bottom-up plan, as well as ensuring that there is synergy all along. Together with the top-down planning series, you now have a complete framework for leading the annual planning process that drive alignment, that build the commitment, and they create the value. And this is foundational work for CFOs. You need to get both approaches right. And once you do that, you set your company up for sustainable success. Any questions? Reach out to me. Thank you so much for being part of the 3-part video series on bottom-up planning. And please refer to the top-down planning. There are 3-part videos to that. That is a prerequisite for bottom-up, but look at those in combination. And you'll have a very good perspective on how to synthesize both. Thank you again for your time. Cheers. Bye.